Welcome to A Magical Life, Health, Wealth and Weight Loss. I'm your host, Magic Barclay, lead practitioner at Holistic Natural Health Australia and #1 best-selling author. In this podcast, I aim to give you practical tips on how to accelerate and sustain your health, increase your financial, spiritual and emotional wealth, and to look at something that haunts many of us needlessly, weight loss. In some episodes, I'll have guests available to give you even more tips, but in others, the floor is yours. Drop us a line at A Magical Life Podcast on Facebook and let me know what you would like to know more about. Now, sit back and enjoy, because it is time for you to create and truly discover a magical life. Welcome back to A Magical Life. I'm your host, Magic Barclay, and today I want to talk to you about coping with loss or upheaval. Now, recently my family had to move. We had to move very suddenly. We were renting a home, and due to COVID restrictions, job losses and the like, our landlord needed to move back into their house. So we had a total of 3 weeks to find a place, completely move, do the vacate, clean, all the things that you need to do when you're renting. This upheaval could have sent me into a tailspin. It was sudden, having to move a whole family. There was so many factors in it that could have upset me. Instead, I channeled my stress. I focused on my inner health, on my inner knowing, and I really turned it around for the positive. And you can do that too. Anytime there's major upheaval in your life, you can either let it sink you or you can swim. So today I want to talk about how to cope with loss or upheaval. Now, there's some major factors when you're learning to cope with something that could be very negative. The first thing that you need to do is you need to gain some control of the situation. So when you have to move suddenly, or the family splits up, or you lose a job, or something happens, you need to gain control of the situation. What you can control is your response to it. That is the main thing that you can control. You can't control whether or not the situation or the event actually happens. So don't try. What you can control is how you respond. So how do you do that? You make lists. You make lists about everything that needs to happen, every component. I made lists for what went into each box, where each box was going. I made lists of what was going into the rubbish, what was going into the skip bin, what needed to happen in the garden. Of course, needed to do the mowing, the edging. I needed to move pot plants. I have catteries for my cats so that they can't kill wildlife. Those needed moving and putting back together. So I had multiple lists. In fact, I still have the lists here sitting on my desk, and I have 38 lists. Now, those 38 lists are actually divided into 3 groups. Why? Because I had 3 weeks. So each week has its own list. I was using a daily planner and writing my lists onto that. And then I was compiling the planners into weeks and then putting a summary list on the front of that. Why? Because I could control it. I could keep track of what was happening. Nothing got left out. Absolutely everything was done. And we got the keys on a Sunday night, and by the Thursday we were completely moved in. And when I say completely moved in, also completely unpacked. Everything in its place. Why? Because I could control that by going through my lists. Now, the other thing that you can control is your self-care. In that time, I closed my office down. Luckily, I had some podcast recordings banked up for you guys so that you didn't miss out, because I knew I could not give the listeners my attention during the move. So what did I do instead of podcasting for you? Instead of working from my office? What I did was self-care. Lots of long, warm showers. I always feel comfortable in a hot shower. I do some great thinking there. So I did that. I started binge watching on Netflix the most ridiculous shows. Why? Because I didn't have to think. It was something I could do at the end of the day. And it was for me to put my feet up and relax. I made body scrubs and mud masks for my face. And I enjoyed just reconnecting with self-care. I made sure that we didn't live on takeaway for the 3 weeks of upheaval, and that I actually had meals ready to go and prepared. I got my kids to jump in and do some of that, because looking after myself was a priority for the move. It meant that my whole family would be happy and healthy. It meant that I would be happy and healthy, because if I went down screaming and crying and feeling unwell, the move wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have been a success that it was. So self-care is something that you can control. And the other thing that you can control are your reactions to things and your emotions. Look, I'm going to admit it. The night that I found out we had to move was a Monday night. I got the call at 5:03 p.m. from the agent saying we had to move. Yes, I went into a tailspin, and yes, we had takeaway that night. But my reaction after the tears, after about an hour of shock, which is normal, my reaction was, I need to look for a rental. Now, it just happens that there was a rental a block away. And it just happened that the landlord was there refurbishing the whole thing because his previous tenants had trashed it. So as I went for my evening walk, yes, I was still doing my walks, my 8K walks throughout this whole thing. I walked past this rental, knocked on the door, and the landlord actually allowed me to have a look around. It was absolutely useless because I had been crying for over an hour. I could hardly see in front of me. I certainly wasn't in a position to take in what I was seeing, the floor plan, the layout of where my family would be or potentially be. But I did anyway. I made a connection with the landlord. We had a chat. I explained my situation. I swung into action because my reaction for this terrible news was, what do I need to do? Not, woe is me, why is this happening? It's everyone's fault. There was a little of that. There was about an hour of that. But it was, okay, I've had my cry, I've had my shock moment. Now I need to make something happen. So my reaction to this news was action. Again, something I could control. The main thing that you can control when you suffer a loss or an upheaval are your emotions. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to mourn and grieve. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to go through all the stages of grief. In fact, you have to. You really have to embrace each stage, but you can cycle through those so quickly when you are in charge of your own emotions. Now, as I'm sitting here talking to you, I'm in my new office. Everything's unpacked. I have my podcasting gear here all set up. I have a door I can close so I can keep the family out while I give you my undivided attention. And I'm happy. I'm grateful for that. In fact, having an office area like this was such a positive from the move. And I'm embracing the positive emotions that are coming from that. Most people, once they've moved house, fall into a bit of a heap, or once they've moved office, fall into a bit of a heap. I didn't. Because as I was unpacking my boxes, I was unpacking books onto shelves. I was sorting my desk out, my client files, my podcasting gear for you guys. So I could hit the ground running and create positive emotions. The negative emotions were still there. They didn't disappear. There was still a little bit of, this has cost so much money to move. I feel like I'm behind. I've had to close the office for a few weeks. There was some of that. There was some shame, some blame, some guilt, some anger, some frustration. That was there, and that's okay. But I embraced those emotions. I recognized them, and I didn't let them derail me. So I want you today, listeners, to look at what you have to deal with. Are you coping with a loss or an upheaval? Is there just a hiccup in the road? Is it a money issue? Is it an employment issue? Is it a family issue? We all have things going on, popping up every single day. How are you going to control the situation? Are you a list maker? Are you more visual? Are you going to draw out a mind map, a visual list? What are your reactions to what's happening? How can you control your emotions and harness them so that they help propel you through the change? Are you taking care of yourself? Because if you fall down, nothing happens. That's just my musings for you today on coping with loss and upheaval. Now, in episode 53, I have Tracy Jewell coming to talk to us about Upself. Tracy Jewell was a participant on Married at First Sight Australia. She's a lovely lady, and she has a lot to share with us. And in fact, she'll be talking to us about her take on what we've spoken about today, coping with loss and upheaval. Tracy is an amazing, resilient young woman, and I know you're going to love hearing from her. In episode 54, we have Kelly Lamb coming to talk to us about motherhood and your health. And we have some more great guests coming up in future episodes. For now, I thank you so much for listening. And my take-home message for you today is you can cope with loss and upheaval. You are powerful. You are strong. You are resilient. You are resourceful. And you are amazing. Go forth and create your magical life.
Thanks for listening today. Please subscribe to hear future episodes, leave a review, and share this podcast. You can follow us on Facebook at A Magical Life Podcast or at Holistic Natural Health Australia. That's holistic with a W. You can find us on Instagram at Holistic Natural Health or at www.holisticnaturalhealth.com.au. That's where you'll access all sorts of articles, freebies, and more.